Welcome to Tell Me More Stories Told This podcast. Today we're diving into one of the most chilling, unsolved mysteries in American history, the case of the Zodiac Killer.
Yeah, one that's both fascinating and terrifying, because despite decades of investigation, we still don't know who he was. He terrorized Northern California in the late 1960s and early 1970s. And even today, his case is a source of speculation and intrigue.
I think what makes this case so captivating is the combination of those brutal crimes and the Zodiac's constant communication with the press. He seemed to just crave attention, sending all those letters, ciphers, and even pieces of evidence just to taunt authorities.
Absolutely. And those ciphers were a huge part of what drew the public in. It was like a puzzle everyone was trying to solve, a race to understand the mind of a killer.
It all began on a quiet December night in 1968 on Lake Herman Road in Benicia. A young couple, David Faraday and Betty Lou Jensen, were just parked when they became the Zodiac's first victims.
The brutality of the attack was shocking. The killer just approached the car and fired multiple shots, killing both teenagers. It seemed completely random, leaving the community terrified and investigators with very few clues.
And then just a few months later, in July 1969, there was another attack, this time at Blue Rock Springs Park in Vallejo. Michael Mageau and Darlene Farron were sitting in their car when a man approached and opened fire.
This time, though, there was a survivor. Michael Mageau was seriously injured, but he lived to give a description of the attacker.
So finally, there was a face to the monster, a description to work with.
You would think so. But even with Mageau's description, the Zodiac remained elusive. And then, just days after the Blue Rock Springs attack, things took an even more sinister turn. The Vallejo Times-Herald, San Francisco Chronicle, and San Francisco Examiner received letters. Each one claimed responsibility for both attacks and contained part of a cipher. The killer, now calling himself Zodiac, demanded the papers print the cipher or face a weekend of terror.
Wow. So not only was he escalating the violence, but he was now directly engaging with the media and, by extension, the public.
Exactly. And it worked. These letters, filled with misspellings and bizarre ramblings, captivated the nation. Everyone was talking about the Zodiac, trying to decipher his messages, and just living in fear of his next move.
And speaking of those ciphers, the one sent to the San Francisco Examiner, the 408 symbol cipher, was actually solved just a week later.
That's right. It was a couple with no background in code breaking, Donald and Betty Hardin, who cracked it.
You have to wonder what it must have felt like for them, solving this puzzle that had stumped everyone else, knowing they were potentially one step closer to unmasking a killer.
It was a major breakthrough in the case, but unfortunately, it didn't lead to the Zodiac's identity. The decoded message was more rambling and threats, mentioning a need for slaves in the afterlife, but no names or concrete clues.
So a victory, but also a chilling reminder that they were dealing with someone deeply disturbed.
Exactly. And then, just a few weeks later, he struck again, this time at Lake Berryessa.
This is the attack with Brian Hartnell and Cecilia Shepard.
Right.
The one where the Zodiac was wearing that bizarre hooded costume.
Yes. This attack takes on an almost theatrical, ritualistic aspect. He approaches the young couple dressed in a black executioner's hood with the Zodiac symbol, a circle with a cross through it, emblazoned on his chest.
It's almost as if he wanted to be recognized, to make sure everyone knew it was him.
Absolutely. He's creating an image, a brand, if you will, for his terror. He binds the students with pre-cut lengths of clothesline, a detail that speaks to the premeditation of his crimes, and then stabs them repeatedly. Cecilia Shepard tragically died from her injuries, but Brian Hartnell survived.
And on Hartnell's car door, the Zodiac left his signature symbol and a list of his previous attacks, like a terrifying scorecard.
And as if the attack itself wasn't brazen enough, what he did next really shocked people. He called the Napa County Sheriff's Office from a payphone, just minutes away from the station, confessing to the crime and reporting the location of the victims.
The audacity. To be that close to the police, knowing they're searching for him, and calmly reporting his own crime. That's a whole other level of confidence and arrogance.
Right. And even though the police were able to lift a palm print from the payphone, it never led to a match. The Zodiac, it seemed, was always one step ahead.
If you're just joining us, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss another episode of Tell Me More. We're about to dive even deeper into the unsettling story of the Zodiac Killer.
Next, we'll talk about the Zodiac's most infamous attack, the murder of Paul Stine in San Francisco. The murder of Paul Stine, that was a real turning point in the Zodiac case. It showed he was willing to operate in broad daylight in a busy city like San Francisco and target seemingly anyone.
It was October 1969 when Paul Stine, a San Francisco cab driver, picked up a fare who turned out to be the Zodiac Killer.
Yeah, the details are chilling. The passenger directed Stein to Presidio Heights, and as they reached the destination, the Zodiac shot Stein in the head, took his wallet and keys, and calmly walked away.
I remember reading that they were actually witnesses to this attack.
Oh, yeah.
3 teenagers across the street saw the Zodiac wiping down the cab and even called the police.
Yeah, and they gave a description of the killer, a white man in his late 20s or early 30s. But tragically, there was a miscommunication with the police dispatcher, and officers were looking for a black suspect.
So the Zodiac, fitting the actual description given by witnesses, just walked away while police were questioning someone else nearby.
Yeah, it was a devastating mistake, a clear sign of how cunning and lucky the Zodiac could be.
And then a few days later, the Chronicle received another letter, this time with a piece of Paul Stein's bloody shirt enclosed.
This was a new level of depravity, like he was showing off, proving he was the real deal, and further terrorizing the city.
He also included a threat in the letter, saying he was going to target a school bus next.
Imagine the fear that gripped San Francisco. Parents were afraid to send their kids to school, and the city was on high alert. The Zodiac had successfully instilled a sense of panic and uncertainty.
It's incredible how he managed to manipulate the media and control the narrative with every letter and every attack.
It speaks to his intelligence, his understanding of how to create fear and garner attention. He wasn't just a killer, he was a master manipulator.
And speaking of manipulation, the letters didn't stop there. In November 1969, he sent a letter with the now infamous 340-character cipher.
This cipher baffled investigators and codebreakers for over 50 years. It became an obsession for many, a symbol of the Zodiac's enduring mystery.
Can you imagine spending decades trying to crack a code, knowing it could potentially hold the key to identifying a killer?
It was a daunting task, but finally, in 2020, an international team of codebreakers cracked the 340.
So what did it reveal? Did they finally find his name?
Unfortunately, no. The message was more the same, disturbing, egotistical ramblings we'd seen before. There was no name, no confession. But it did give us a deeper look into his psyche, his delusions of grandeur, and his complete lack of remorse.
So another piece of the puzzle, but still no clear picture of who he was or why he did it.
Exactly. And the Zodiac's confirmed activities, they seemed to just stop after that. There were a few more letters, but nothing on the scale of the previous attacks.
But even though the attacks stopped, the mystery didn't. People continued to investigate, to search for answers, to try and make sense of this horrific chapter in American history.
And that's part of what makes the Zodiac case so fascinating. It's a story that's still being written, a puzzle that's still being pieced together.
It's like a collective obsession, trying to understand the mind of a killer and bring him to justice, even after all these years.
And with so many unanswered questions, there's always the possibility of new discoveries, new evidence coming to light.
Speaking of unanswered questions, what about all the other possible victims linked to the Zodiac? There are a number of unsolved cases that share similarities with his known attacks.
That's right. Cases like the murder of Cherry Jo Bates in Riverside, California in 1966 have drawn a lot of attention from Zodiac researchers.
I remember reading about that case. There was a handwritten letter sent to the police that some believe could have been written by the Zodiac.
Yes, the letter boasted about the murder and had some stylistic similarities to the Zodiac's known handwriting. But officially, the Bates case remains unsolved.
And then there's the case of Robert Domingos and Linda Edwards, a young couple shot to death on a beach near Santa Barbara in 1963.
That one is particularly interesting because of the use of pre-cut rope to bind the victims, which echoes the attack at Lake Berryessa.
It's like a web of potential connections, these unsettling threads that seem to lead back to the Zodiac, even years before his confirmed activities in the Bay Area.
It makes you wonder if those connections are real. How far back does his reign of terror actually go? And how many more victims might there be out there?
It's a chilling thought, knowing that there could be other unsolved cases connected to this killer.
And that brings us to the question of suspects. Over the years, there have been countless individuals investigated, some more seriously than others.
But one name always seems to come up: Arthur Lee Allen.
Arthur Lee Allen was a prime suspect for many years. He had a history of violence, owned a watch with the Zodiac symbol, and even knew one of the victims.
There was also circumstantial evidence linking him to some of the crimes, but nothing concrete enough to charge him.
Despite extensive investigations, Allen was never definitively linked to the Zodiac killings. He died in 1992, taking his secrets, if he had any, to the grave.
It's fascinating how, even though he was never charged, Allen's name remains so closely tied to the Zodiac case.
It's a testament to the enduring power of this mystery. People are still trying to piece together the puzzle to find the missing link that will finally solve the case.
And while Allen's involvement remains debated, the fact that the Zodiac was never definitively identified is both frustrating and terrifying.
It leaves us with the unsettling possibility that he could have been anyone, that he could have lived a seemingly normal life after the killings, his dark secret hidden from the world.
It's a sobering reminder that even in the face of overwhelming evidence and relentless investigation, some mysteries may never be fully solved. It really is mind-boggling to think that someone capable of such calculated cruelty could just vanish, like just blend right back into everyday life.
Yeah.
Poof, gone.
It really speaks to the enduring power of this mystery. The Zodiac, he became a symbol of unsolved terror, and that continues to fascinate and frighten people, even today.
We've talked about the ciphers, the attacks, the suspects, but what about the cultural impact? This case has been the subject of countless books, movies, documentaries, and even inspired, amateur detectives to try and solve it.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. The Zodiac case, it tapped into something in the public consciousness, became a cultural phenomenon, like a symbol of the unknown and the darkness that can lurk beneath the surface of seemingly normal life.
Yeah, it's like a real-life horror story that continues to capture our imaginations and fuel our fascination with true crime.
And that fascination is understandable. We're drawn to these stories because they force us to confront the darker aspects of human nature, to grapple with the idea that evil can exist anywhere, even in our own backyards.
It's also a reminder that despite, advances in technology and investigative techniques, some cases remain stubbornly unsolved, leaving us with more questions than answers.
And that's perhaps the most unsettling aspect of the Zodiac case. The lack of closure, the possibility that he could still be out there somewhere, continues to haunt us.
It's a case that challenges our sense of justice and order, reminding us that sometimes the bad guys do win, at least for a while.
Yeah.
But it also speaks to the resilience of the human spirit, right? Like the unwavering desire to seek truth and justice, even in the face of overwhelming odds.
Yeah.
Even after all these years, people haven't given up on solving the Zodiac case. They're still dedicated investigators, researchers, and amateur sleuths, poring over every detail, hoping to find that one missing piece of the puzzle.
And who knows? Maybe someday, with new technology or a fresh perspective, the mystery of the Zodiac Killer will finally be solved. But until then, it remains a chilling reminder of the darkness that can exist in the world and the enduring power of unsolved mysteries.
Well, that about wraps up our deep dive into the case of the Zodiac Killer, a story that continues to fascinate and terrify us all, leaving us with more questions than answers.
Yeah, a case that reminds us of the fragility of life, the complexities of human nature, and that enduring search for truth and justice.
Thank you for joining us on Tell Me More Stories Told This podcast. We'll be back next time with another captivating tale from the annals of history. Until then, stay curious, stay informed, and stay safe.